Hi, I'm Marc Mikulich, Technical Product Manager for Small Character Technologies here at Squid Inc. In today's video, we are going to discuss troubleshooting, removing, and cleaning the nozzle of our gun body in our JetStream CIJ printer. All right, if you're watching this video, you've probably arrived at the conclusion that you have no ink jet and no clean jet coming out of the nozzle in your print head. You may have just watched our video on troubleshooting the inkjet portion of this. So this is really going to cover specifically, again, no inkjet, no clean jet, nothing coming out of the nozzle whatsoever. We're going to show you how to remove the nozzle, clean it, troubleshoot it, make sure it's free of any obstructions and reinstalled properly. All right, so a couple of symptoms in this scenario that are going to tell us we have no inkjet or no clean jet are fairly straightforward. One is if we start the system up and we have the print head out of the sleeve, we watch the jetting on process, and we see absolutely no fluid coming out of our nozzle. So no ink, no clean jet, nothing. In that scenario, what the printer is going to do, it's going to shut itself down. So the gutter sensor is going to recognize that there's no ink going into the gutter return. The printer is going to shut itself off. What it's going to do then is give us a gutter fault. And we're going to see that here in our alarm log. We have jet off, gutter fault as our most recent alarm outside of us just having the print head cover open. So this is a good indicator there's no ink going into the gutter. Again, we can also visually verify that if we watch the print head as the system starts up. All right, so in the situation where we have a complete blockage of the nozzle, we're going to take the print head out of the sleeve. And again, we're going to try to access that nozzle, remove it, and clean it. An important distinction to make here is, again, there's nothing coming out of the nozzle whatsoever. If you have a little bit of fluid coming out, even just a slight drip, you're going to want to review our backflush or purging the nozzle video. If there's a little bit of fluid coming out, it's a good idea to try to backflush the nozzle first. Try to clean it out that way before we have to go through the process of completely removing it from the system. So really in this situation, we're not able to backflush it. You were not able to clean it out at all. It's a complete blockage, and we have to pull that nozzle out. All right, since we are going to completely remove the nozzle in this situation, it's a good idea to power your system off. Okay, we're not jetting. We're going to completely power the system down. That way there's no risk of someone accidentally starting jetting while we're working on the system. If we have the nozzle out and someone starts jetting the system accidentally, we're gonna have a pretty big mess. So make sure you turn the printer off in this situation. Okay, so now we're gonna take our print head out of the sleeve. It's very likely you already had it out to verify that there's absolutely no ink coming out of our nozzle. We had no jet here whatsoever. So what we're gonna do is get this situated so we can start to work on the print head. And the first thing we're going to do is actually just remove this inner cover, this inner stainless steel cover, so it's easier for us to work on this assembly. Okay, so we've got our inner cover removed here, and really the main reason we did that is you'll notice that cover came pretty far up here on our two hydraulic lines going to the gun body. What we're ultimately going to have to do here is unbolt our gun body so we can access the nozzle. And having that inner cover off just gives us some flexibility in this tubing when we're moving this assembly around. If we still have the cover on, these tubes can kind of push up against that inner cover and potentially get bent or kinked in that process. Okay, so the only tool we need to get the nozzle out of the gun body is a 2mm Allen wrench or hex wrench, okay? So that's going to allow us to take off the two mounting screws for our gun body block and also access the nozzle itself or the nozzle cover. So, okay, so first thing we're going to do is we just need to get the gun body block and gun body assembly off of this mounting plate. Now, we do have two different configurations for this. This is our high frequency or high speed printer, so the mounting hardware is on the left-hand side from my perspective. If it's a lower frequency printer, our 76.8 kilohertz system, which is more common, the mounting hardware is just going to be on the right-hand side. It's the same exact hardware. We just have 2 screws right here, and the nozzle cap is going to be identical. Okay, so we're just going to take these screws out, pretty straightforward. There is a flat washer and locking washer on the front, so just be mindful of that. Set this aside. And on the back, we just have a locking washer with the screw. Our flat washer is actually connected to a ground for our gun body, so we don't have to worry about the flat washer dropping. Okay, so we're going to set these aside, and now our gun body block and gun body assembly is going to move freely. Obviously, we're still connected to the hydraulic lines. We really don't need to detach those. One thing you may have noticed when I slid this out is the eccentric wheel for vertical adjustment is just kind of sitting in here loosely. So it's sitting between this plate and our block in this cavity here. So just be mindful of this. Okay, it is going to come out most likely, so just set that aside. So we've got easy access to our gun body assembly here. Our gun body is inside this black block. So it's kind of this long cylindrical stainless looking tube here. And all we need access to is the front of the assembly. So right here, our nozzle resides in the front of this assembly. So what we have is a locking plate on the front that our wrench is going to fit into. There's a gasket behind it, then our nozzle, and then another gasket. We want that nozzle. That's where that little 50, 60, or 70 micron orifice is. That's what's very likely obstructed in this scenario. Okay, so we've cleaned this up a little bit. You can kind of see where that, again, this wrench is going to fit into this cover. We're obviously working with some very small components here, so be prepared. You know, be in a workstation if you can where, you know, if this drops, it's going to be caught. We don't want to be doing this out over the production floor where this could disappear if it falls. So we're going to put our wrench in, and we're going to rotate this counterclockwise. And this is just the locking cover for the nozzle assembly. Okay, so you see there's not a lot of threads on here. It doesn't take much to get it out. We're going to set this aside. I highly recommend you set these components on a lint-free cloth. Okay, we don't want to get any fibers or anything inside this small assembly. Okay, so the nozzle cover or locking cover is out. Now you'll see we've got a gasket right here, and then right behind that gasket is the nozzle itself. So the gasket is just white in color. This is Delron material. We're going to need to get that out. What I use to remove some of these components is literally just a dental pick, basically. Or if you have a very, very small flathead screwdriver or anything like that, you can try to carefully pull this gasket out. You do want to be mindful of the nozzle. We don't want to scratch around in here. Again, the center of the nozzle is exposed right now. So we just want to be careful with that. So we're going to try to pull this gasket out so then we can get to the nozzle. Okay, so there's our little gasket. We're going to set that aside. And now we have our nozzle. This is a synthetic ruby. Hopefully you guys can see that. That's what we're after. Again, that's got the little teeny tiny orifice in it that is likely blocked. So we want to get this out and clean it up. The best way to get the nozzle out is to kind of push on the outer edges. Again, we don't want to work the middle of the nozzle at all. There's no reason to do that. And again, we don't want to scratch that orifice up or cause any potential damage to it. So this can be a little bit tricky. Again, we're going to push on the outer edges to try to pop this out. You can also just tap on the block. Oftentimes it'll fall out. Just be ready for that. Again, this is a very small component. We don't want it to go flying and falling onto the floor. Okay, so again, oftentimes you can just tap on this assembly and it'll come falling out. If it's really stuck in here, you may have to kind of, again, work the outer edges, pushing on it and it will pop out. You can take cleaning solvent as well in your squeeze bottle and spray it in here to try to loosen it up. Again, just make sure that that cleaning solvent matches the makeup base in your printer. Okay, but this is just sitting in here, you know, basically freely, so it will come out. It just might take some work. Okay, once our nozzle is out, you'll notice there is another gasket inside the gun body that was behind the nozzle. Just make sure that's still there. And if it fell out, you can go ahead and set it aside for now. Both of these gaskets are identical, so the gasket in front of the gun nozzle and behind the nozzle, they're the same. They're very, very inexpensive. Not a bad idea in this scenario to just have a couple extras on hand, just in case. But just be mindful that there is one obviously behind the nozzle as well. Okay, so again, we're really focused on the nozzle here. Again, that's our very likely the culprit in this scenario. So we've got the nozzle here in a close-up. There is a proper way or orientation that this has to go into the gun body. There are two different sides. So the back, or the side that goes into the gun body first, is concave. So you'll see there's an indentation here. This is concave on this side. Okay? So if there was an obstruction, it was likely forced in from this side. Okay? So if we were to try to clean this, you know, if you're going to force any solvent at it, we'd do it from the opposite side. Pretty tough to do. What we'll likely do in this scenario is just soak the nozzle. So we'll talk about that in a little bit, but we do want to point out again how this is set up first. So we have a concave side, and if we turn it over, we have a flat side. Okay? So this is the side that's normally facing out or pointing out. Okay? Very important. This is easier to see, you know, in real life when you're holding this. It is easier to make the distinction between the flat side and the concave side. It's very important that when we're done working on the nozzle, when we're done cleaning it, that concave side has to go in first. If we have it backwards, you're going to have a heck of a time, obviously, getting the system to run. It will jet, but the jet will be very inconsistent, again, because everything's backwards. So what we're going to do now is talk about cleaning the nozzle, and then we'll go about reinstalling it. To clean this out, we've got the flat side facing up. The concave side is obviously on the back. Again, if there's an obstruction, it's likely forced in from the back side here, okay? So we could try to spray some solvent on the front of this assembly, or this nozzle, I'm sorry. You can try that. The best thing to do with this really is to get it in a beaker with some solvent and let it soak. If you have an ultrasonic cleaner or ultrasonic bath, that's ideal. What we will do with that is we will put this in a beaker with cleaning solvent, and we'll give it an ultrasonic bath for about an hour. Okay, so we're gonna let our nozzle soak. So I'm just gonna pick it up here. We're gonna put it in a beaker. And one thing to do when you put it in your tray or beaker, whatever it is that we're going to put cleaning solvent in, try to have that concave side of the nozzle facing down in your solution, okay? I know that's kind of maybe sounds a little bit difficult to do, but just verify once you place it in here that that concave side is down. And then what we're going to do is just submerge the nozzle in our cleaner. Again, please make sure you use the same solvent or makeup cleaner that matches the makeup in your printer. Again, it doesn't take much. Just fully submerge it. Make sure there's a little bit extra if you are using an ultrasonic cleaner or bath. You know, you're probably going to burn off a little bit of solvent during that cleaning process. So make sure you've got a healthy amount in here. Again, ideally we want this to clean for about an hour. Once we're done, we'll go ahead and reinstall it into the gun body, and that should resolve our blockage issue. Okay, so we've cleaned our nozzle, and we're going to go ahead and reinstall it. So again, very, very important to note that that concave side Might be, again, a little bit tough to see in the video here. You can see that indentation or that concave side. That has to go in first. That's the side that's going in first into our gun body. So we're going to put that back in. Again, before we do that, verify that that back gasket is in place. So you'll see that white ring. Okay, we're going to put our nozzle back in. Again, concave side first. And once you get it in, you can see here that flat side pointing out. Pretty easy to tell if you've got it right. If you see that indentation or that concave side right now, you're going to take the nozzle back out and reinstall it the right way. So we've got the nozzle in correctly. Now we've got to put that gasket, the front gasket that goes between the nozzle and the locking plate, in. Okay, so we've got that right here. Again, these are very inexpensive, not a bad idea to just have new ones or a couple spares just in case. Obviously, you know, small, fairly easy to lose. So we've got that back in. And lastly, we've got our locking plate. Locking plate you can typically start by hand. So if you get it situated in here, you can put your thumb or finger over it, rotate it clockwise a few times, and then you can finish it with your Allen wrench. An important note here, when you do put your wrench in, don't force it in. Again, your nozzle is sitting back there, so we don't want to punch this in. We just need to tighten the plate. Okay, we want this to be fairly snug, and this is just hand tight. We just don't want any leaking to occur when we start the system back up. So simple as that. Again, you've got a gasket, your nozzle, another gasket, and then the locking plate. We'll also insert a handy image here in the video, the breakdown of those components for the nozzle. Okay, so now we just need to remount our gun body block assembly. So again, make sure we get that eccentric wheel back in. So that was sitting in the side of the block here. And again, this raised part will fit through our mounting plate. So we want to get that in. Okay. And then what we're going to do is just put our two screws on the side here really quick, and we'll talk about what we need to do for positioning after that. Okay, so remember our back screw here, we had a locking washer but not a flat washer because our flat washer is essentially part of the ground for the gun body. So we're going to slide that in. Okay, and then our other screw again has a locking washer and flat washer. That goes towards the front here. Now this front screw, this is a locking and a pivot screw. This can be tightened all the way. The back screw doesn't really need to be tight all the way. The reason I say that is this is what we typically loosen for our vertical inkjet alignment. Now, since we've removed the gun body and gun body block assembly, it's very possible our vertical alignment or inkjet alignment is off a little bit since we did remove this. Horizontal should still be exactly where it was. That's locked in on the bottom of the plate here. We didn't touch that. So again, our horizontal inkjet alignment should be okay. The vertical, we will likely have to adjust a little bit when we start the system back up and we verify that we've got an inkjet. So we'll leave this loose for alignment. And again, if you're not sure how to manually align this, again, we're just worried about the vertical alignment, make sure you go view our manually aligning the inkjet or ink stream on your JetStream printer. Fairly straightforward. Again, we only have to worry about the vertical in this scenario. So that's the only thing we have to do once we get the clean nozzle reinstalled. All right, so we've got our nozzle cleaned out and reinstalled. If you're having troubles cleaning out your nozzle, if you just can't get that blockage out, they are replaceable. And as far as a nozzle is concerned for a CIJ printer, they're very inexpensive. So you can swap these out if you need to as well. Again, once you've got the nozzle reinstalled and everything mounted back up, the only thing you're going to need to do likely when you start the printer back up and you've got a jet is realigning that vertical adjustment. So again, make sure you view our manually realigning your inkjet or ink stream for JetStream video. That's going to help you get that inkjet back to where it needs to be. All right, that wraps up our video on troubleshooting the gun body nozzle in your JetStream CIJ printer. Please make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can view other videos on the JetStream or any of our other products. Also, don't hesitate to visit squidink.com. That'll have additional information on our entire product line. Thanks again.